Hey guys, Brian here from LCS. Thanks for stopping by the channel. And this video, do you use debt to build your collection? So I often talk about personal finance topics as it relates to collecting, whether it's, comic books or pop figures or toys or whatever it may be. I just think it's an important subject. We use money our entire lives. And so I like to weave in the personal finance aspects of collecting, and hopefully this will help educate or help somebody along the way to think a little bit differently about their money and their collecting. Now, there is another channel that I'd like to mention, Comic Book Investments. And Dave over at Comic Book Investments does Financial Friday. Every Friday, he releases a video on a financial topic. And I think the video series is really, really good. And he's a little bit younger than me, lives on the left coast. So you might want to just check him out if you like this kind of content. He does a bunch of other great comic book content, unboxings. He's a dealer, so he buys and sells comics. So he has really a good library of comic book content. But I really enjoy his Financial Fridays where he kind of digs into personal finance topics. So and I'm always up for learning something new. So it's always good to hear somebody else's perspective on the topic. So, but let's get back to it. So let's talk about debt, right? Often people get into trouble with debt by, over time with like 1,000, small cuts, right? You're using a credit card here and there for little things. You're running short on money one week, or, you have an emergency, the car breaks, the dishwasher blows up, things like that. And so it's slowly over time, you end up in a huge amount of debt. And you really need to, be aware of it. And I think that could happen in, when you're collecting, right? Because there's FOMO, FOMO is real, right? People, have fear of missing out on things. We see all of the great, comic books and artwork that are being, produced in different variant covers. And we want a lot of these things, and we may not have the money for them, and we may rely on, credit to be able to purchase some of these things. And you think about it, you've probably heard about good debt versus bad debt. What is good debt and what is bad debt. I mean, generally, my philosophy is debt. All debt is bad, but there are certain circumstances where you may have to take on debt. I took out a mortgage to buy a house, right? I didn't have the few $100,000 saved to buy the house outright, so I had to take on a loan and take on debt to do that. Now that's a pretty, safe bet, taking on that kind of loan because you have a big asset behind it, and typically you can sell that asset if you needed to. I would say though, when buying a house, that you try to buy with as much cash as possible, and also take out a 15-year mortgage, right? Because that reduces your the amount of years that you'll be paying that house down, and the amount of years that you're in debt. People talk about student loan debt as well. That's a good debt because if you have a college degree, you can earn more money. Now, this is typically true, right? There's plenty of data that suggests that. But the other thing to keep in mind is that you want to limit the amount of money you're borrowing for a college degree. You go to a community college for the first 2 years, then transfer to a bigger school and get finish your degree there. People I don't think often look at that. They just look at they fall in love with the prettiness of a campus, or because their friends are going there, or it's a school that their parents went to, things like that. And you shouldn't let that rule your decision. You should really look at what's the least amount of money I need to borrow to get my college degree so that I can maximize my income. But when you think about collecting, like I said, I want to kind of illustrate the point of if you use a credit card, because credit card is really, in most cases, bad debt, right? The only way that you can really effectively use a credit card and it not be bad debt is to use it to purchase things and then pay off the entire balance in full before the end of the month. And people do use that. It's kind of a hack to get free, points and rewards and travel miles and things like that. But you have to be very disciplined to be able to do that. And if you don't, you're going to, rack up some debt and then have interest, each month, and then ultimately end up paying a lot more for an item than you would if you bought it with cash, outright. So, think about it. Debt is a 4-letter word, right? And there's a reason for it because it's bad. And so let's look at a collecting example. So let's say you want to invest or even purchase an Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 9.8, slab 9.8 condition. According to Go Collect, the fair market value on that book is around $7,000. So let's say you find one, it's in great shape, 9.8, everything looks good on the book, and you buy it. But you use a credit card to pay for it. Whether you buy it on eBay or one of the other auction sites. So like I said, unless you pay that $7,000 off at the end of the month, that first month that you purchased the book, you're going to begin to incur interest. And so for simplicity, let's just say that credit card has a 10% interest rate. And let's say you make a minimum payment of $200 per month. Because you're paying down, you're paying interest each month, that $200 that you are, paying towards the credit card bill is not all of it is going towards the $7,000 balance. So say, $50 of it goes to interest and $150 goes towards the principal. So if we use that as an example, and I won't bore you with all of the math, but I did the calculation. If you continue to make that $200 payment, it's going to take you roughly 42 months or 3.5 years to pay off that Amazing Spider-Man 300. And you'll pay an extra $1,300. So that $7,000 initial cost is really now $8,300. So that's a lot more, than I think most people realize when they're using credit cards. Would you pay $8,300 for a book that is worth $7,000 today? No, not unless you've got, a lot of cash and no other debt. You wouldn't overpay for something. Now, let's say you use that, you pay it off. You pay off the, the book, you use a credit card, but you do finance it, you pay it off, you pay the extra, $1,300, total $8,300. Now, let's say you keep it for obviously longer than, the credit card payments were. And say 5 years, right? So a year and a half more than what it took you to pay it off on the credit card. And let's say the book increases in value to $10,000. And you sell that book for, $10,000. You'd say, oh, well, I made a $3,000 profit. I bought it for $7,000. I sold it for $10,000. I held it, for a period of time. I made $3,000. Well, not exactly true, right? You have to factor in the interest that you paid. So it's really $8,300 that you paid for it. And so now you've only really profited $1,700, not the $3,000, right? So you really have to consider that. And this is just, an example that I'm throwing out there to kind of just illustrate the fact that when you don't pay off your credit cards in full every month, that you're paying more for things. And it could be, a cup of coffee. It could be, dinner. It could be groceries. It could be a vacation. Whatever it is, whatever you're using, to the credit card for, you are paying more when you don't pay it off in full. So you really need to consider that. And, what happens is often that people will use a credit card and kind of max it out. or get close to their total credit line and then ask for an increase, or maybe add a second card or a department store card, things like that. Luckily, I have never run into an LCS that offers a credit card. So, I mean, I'm sure you've been in, stores, Target, Walmart, other department stores where they throw out that offer. Oh, if you apply for a card today, we'll give you 10% off or 20% off. So, and that's really just a hook to get you using the card. And typically those department store cards have a very high interest rate, 20, 25%. So you're paying even more for things that you don't pay off in full. So you really need to consider that when you're collecting, right? If you're collecting comic books or whatever the case may be, if you're using a credit card, you're going to eventually pay more for the items that you're purchasing. And, really to avoid that is to not use a credit card, right? Purchase things in cash. If you don't have the money for those things, well, then maybe you need to wait. Maybe you need to wait a week or two or a month or whatever it may be until you have the cash to be able to purchase whatever item you're collecting outright. And you say, well, the Amazing Spider-Man 300 is going to go up in value. If I don't buy it now, I'm going to miss out. Well, how much value is it going to go up in the next, year or two? Is it going to go up, a lot more? Do you want to hedge your bet by putting something on a credit card? I wouldn't do that. It's certainly a personal choice, but I want to kind of just outline these, the details of a credit card, because I think a lot of times people don't really understand the impact that using a credit card or carrying a high balance on a credit card can have. And certainly if you're buying things that are not really necessities, things like collectibles, comic books, pop figures, eating out, clothes, things that you may not, necessarily need, but really, really want, it's really not a good idea. So I hope this information was useful. Like I said, I'm always kind of looking at collecting, and I'm seeing all of the, great comic book, YouTubers who have incredible stack of books and pop figures and figures, and some have full full-size video game cabinets behind them. And so I just get worried when I see all of this stuff, and I wonder how they paid for it. And I don't want them to get into trouble financially because they have a really big collection of comics or toys that are sitting in their background, potentially collecting dust. And maybe, certainly slab books and things like that can be sold and moved, through eBay or some of the other auction sites. But, if you're still paying those books off from a credit card, you're potentially setting yourself up for losing money. So, my recommendation would be always try to buy with cash, when possible. And if you can't, then maybe you just need to hold off on the purchase of those things. So, like I said, I hope you find this information useful. I think it's important to look at that because, like I said, we use money our entire lives, and there's not a lot of education about it. There should be more, and so that's why I'm kind of broaching this topic, because I think it's it's a topic. Finances, personal finances, is a topic that most people could learn a little bit more about. So. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please hit that like button. If you've not subscribed to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.